So do you know where the name Bigfoot actually come from? Like, I'm sure you know what it is. If I say Bigfoot, you're going to be like, yeah, I get it. Big hairy monsters got big feet. It makes sense to have that name. Big hands, big feet. Nah, we ain't. I got kind of curious about this. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have to do a little bit of a dive to figure out why it has a household name of Bigfoot and not Sasquatch or the wild man of the woods, which is kind of a derivative of like Sasquatch. It's kind of like how. Anyways, this story starts in Humboldt County, California. And Humboldt County has a lot of like, I don't know, dealings with Bigfoot, it seems. But this all goes back to 1958 with Jerry Crew. Jerry Crew was a operator. He ran a dozer for a logging company, and that's primarily what he did. He worked in this one specific spot for around 2 years when he shows up to work early one morning, waves at his boss, Shorty, by the way, and heads on up to his dozer. His dozer is located on the far end of the job, and his whole job is to like go through and where they cut all the trees and stuff down, he's supposed to rip the stumps up and kind of give him a rough road to get back into him. So he goes out to start his dozer. He gets up on there and he looks down and he's like, that's odd. That is a track. Most definitely it looks like a giant human footprint. So this kind of like gets him curious. So he heads down to the boss and he's like, hey, Shorty, I was getting ready to get on the dozer and I think somebody's pranking us. There's a big freaking footprint up there. Well, the other crewmen start hearing him talk about this and they're like, you know what? I've seen a few different tracks myself. And Shorty's like, this might have something to do with some of the weird crap that's been going on around here. And they're like, oh yeah, like what? Well, apparently they lost a 50-gallon drum of fuel. Now, a 50-gallon drum of fuel is extremely heavy, and they happened to find it a couple days later down in a ravine. The only problem is the barrel went into the ravine without squishing any of the foliage around. It looked like somebody picked it up and threw it into a ravine. Now, a barrel of fuel is like 400 pounds. You don't just pick that up and toss it. Not only that, but they had another incident where a tractor tire seemed to like get moved and thrown into another ditch. Now, with both of these incidents, there wasn't really any drag marks or anything like that, but there was very large feet prints surrounding the area. Well, the guys are all like into this now. They're throwing up their big stories that they've seen, these other incidents that's happened, and they kind of blow it off. Shorty's like, you know what, guys, I'd love to hear about it, but in the meantime, I would appreciate it if y'all will like actually start working. They're like, okay, no big deal. They go back to work, they finish out their day while they're still talking about all these different incidents. Obviously, they're not just going to completely go back to work. They gotta do a little bit of a chit-chatting before they really get started. So they have all these incidents going on. Now, back in this time, 1958, back in the woods, where most of them just stayed. They would pull in house trailers and they would just live there because it was like a 2-hour drive to get back to the main town. The only person that really traveled was Jerry Crew, and that's because he had a lot of church duties that he had to do, and he was just really active with the town. Anyways, they would all sit around throughout the week and they would tell these stories because they didn't have a lot to do. Like I said, they're 2 hours from town and you're just going to tell stories. It's something to keep the spirits up. And there was a couple that stayed there named Jess and Corla Bismuth. Now, in this profession at this time, it really wasn't a big deal for these workers to have their wives and kids there on the job. Like, they would just stay in the trailers so they'd be able to see their family throughout the week or on the weekends, and it was a lot easier on everybody. Now, Corla was later interviewed. She's like, this was all just a big story thing. It was something to keep everybody's spirits up. We just had a good time with it. She's like, I would even add my little parts here and there, but nobody really believed that Bigfoot was a thing. It was just something to keep our spirits going, some tall tales to fill in the time. Now, fast forward a couple weeks later, you got Jerry Crew and Jeff Bismuth and just a couple of the other workers pull up onto the job site back there where the dozer is, and they notice a ton of tracks. But it wasn't just a few. You could see them going for a long way. Not only that, but they even went up and measured them, saying that most of the time it looked like it had a 50-inch stride, and whenever it was like maybe running, it was more like a 10-foot stride. Now, this is whenever it went from like, haha, this was a prank, to this is something pretty serious. And it was such a big deal that people ended up actually quitting the job site because they were so freaked out about it. It was no longer a prank. And not only that, but it kept going. Now, whenever this turned into like a bigger event and they were kind of worried about it, Corley got a hold of somebody named Andrew Gonzoli. Now, Andrew Gonzoli was a reporter for the Humboldt Times. That was kind of what he did. Now, whenever Gonzoli received this message, he was like, whatever, somebody's trying to prank me. I don't really want to deal with this. It's it's something I just don't want to put up with right now. So a few weeks later, Gonzoli kind of ran out of source material. He didn't have anything to run. He's like, this would be a fun little article to run on the Sunday paper. So the title of the fun little story was, Maybe We Have a Relative of the Abominable Snowman of the Himalayas. Now in this article, he discusses how Jerry Crew and the rest of them are being observed by some sort of creature with a very big foot. And from that point on, the story absolutely exploded. And that is how we got the household name of Bigfoot, from that story right there. And I think that is very fascinating. Anyways, I figured you all would get a kick out of that. I figured it was a fun little dive on like the history of Bigfoot and where the name come from. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. Let me know if you all would like to know like the beginning of something else. Maybe I could find it. This one was actually not that hard to dig up. So yes, I thought that was fun. If you like that, please consider subscribing, liking, it helps. I would like to get to like 2,000 followers. I think that'd be pretty cool. Anyways, I hope you all have a wonderful day and I appreciate you. Bye.